So I wanted to start things off, Wendy, by kind of discussing the evolution of live events. I know we have a certain amount of time here and we could talk about that forever, basically, but you have 30 years of experience in corporate America and a track record of executing high profile national and international events. You know it all. And whether you'd like to admit it or not, I know you believe the largest room in the house is room for improvement, and we might know a lot and we can always learn more. And you've seen different shifts over the past few decades.
Yeah.
But really, based on your experience, Wendy, what's been the biggest shift you've seen in the industry over the last few years?
Yeah, well, I think honestly, what is the same, right? I think there's been really big changes since 2020, since COVID, right? So when COVID hit, obviously everything closed down. And so we saw a really big shift at that point to virtual, right? So we saw all these tech companies coming in and all these cool virtual platforms. And really that really changed the way we do virtual events and then in effect, how we do hybrid events, right? So when we came back from COVID, we saw lots of increases in costs. We saw, the integration of technology in a really different way because of what we learned during COVID. So I think things are fundamentally different now than they were in 2020, really.
And inside of all that, how are participants, attendees, guests going to respond, right?
Yeah, well, so one of the good things actually that's come over the last couple of years is that we now have research. I think the pandemic really forced people to really look hard at events. Like, do we really need to be doing these? And when we come back, are we going to go back to live? Are we going to really invest in these again? What should we be doing? It was kind of a pause for everybody to sort of reevaluate their event planning. And so a lot of research kind of came out during COVID and just after COVID when we started going back to live. And so I've known this intuitively for decades that events were important. And I always felt like I was sort of fighting for my existence inside of corporate because events were sort of the low-hanging fruit and the first thing to get cut when people are cutting expenses. But what we know now is that we have research that says that events are the number one marketing channel now for both ROI and building trust. So we just know a lot more. We're smarter now, honestly, because of COVID. And so we're also seeing, budgets really shifting and putting more emphasis on events. We're seeing marketing budgets now where, sometimes a quarter of the marketing budget is focused on events. So it's becoming an imperative for organizations to understand the value of events, resource them properly, both from a budgetary standpoint and a resource standpoint, and really making sure they're maximizing their dollars for their ROI.
Now that data has come in, professionals like you, or it is a badge of honor. 30 years, you've weathered the storm and earned your scars, and earned your street cred. But really, you've been beating the drum with or without the data, or seen how the data has evolved and proven the thesis or the point. And not that there's rancor or reticence, like, oh, I've been telling you this, but it is a little bit, I don't know if you have this experience where it's kind of like, duh, obviously.
Yeah,
like,
I told you so.
Yeah, a little bit of I told you so, but I'm like, you needed that data, especially marketers, right? And I'm not talking event marketers. I'm talking in general, product, business to business, business to consumer. I mean, you have hundreds, if not thousands of people over a period of time. I mean, I think of like dead shows or Lollapalooza, and look at the Sphere. It's kind of like a dead show on roids,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, of course, they could command, apart from the technology and the spike in excitement and everything that comes along with it, and the city that you're in, and it's new, and when you two and everybody opens it up, but it's like, duh, obviously,
Yeah.
You have people literally banging shoulders and rubbing elbows, literally. And you can have your product, your initiatives, your messages, your services right there everywhere. And for decades, you've been like, hey, hello.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and honestly, it's all about, it's about the numbers. The CFOs want to see the numbers.
Right. And
they just do.
I remember, but the initial aspects of the hard turn into virtual, whether it's Zoom or all the other platforms, CFOs are like, see, we don't have to wine and dine them.
Yes and no,
Right.
right? There's a place for virtual. There is a place for virtual, but you
Totally.
have to do it right. It's,
Yeah.
if you my our mantra has been, if you can do it on Zoom, don't do it in the room, right? So if it is something you can do virtually, then do it virtually. But when you're in person, you need to make sure the experience is something that, you can only get when you're in person.
Right.
My experience when I was producing virtuals, it was really like to do it well, it was like producing a TV show, a live TV show,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
So I think back to, if you guys remember, when the election was happening and we had the virtual DNC and the virtual RNC,
Yes.
right? It was really interesting to see how they produced that, and they were going to all these live remotes, and they were all over the country, and it was well done. That was a good virtual event for
Yeah.
both of them,
And
honestly.
and you
So,
know, I mean, this podcast and especially having industry heavyweight like you, we might explode the internet on downloads after we publish this episode. But even, you and I, if we were on camera pre-COVID and we were working through some of the technologies that existed then, we might not have been that attentive to the microphone, the lighting, the positioning, being thoughtful in our responses and stuff like that. So even that is seeped into everyday life, which we
yep,
can
for
credit
sure.
to not TV, but really the event industry and contributing in that manner.